and then I'd be happy to take your questions. I want to take this opportunity to first acknowledge that yesterday's report of the Integrity Commissioner pointed to very clear flaws to the process that led to the removal of the lands being removed from the Greenbelt. I accept that I ought to have had greater oversight over my former Chief of Staff and over the process. And to Ontarians, I want to say very sincerely that I apologize that I did not. I'm committed to making sure that the flaws of the kind outlined in the report by Justice Wake do not happen again. That's why we've worked very closely and transparently with the Integrity Commissioner's Office, which he acknowledged yesterday in his report. And that's why, as a government, we're already taking steps to improve the decision-making process moving forward. As the Integrity Commissioner also noted, our government's motivation has always been to build homes, including those that came about as a result of the changes we made to the Greenbelt. Our government recognizes that we have a generational housing supply problem. We have a crisis of affordability in our province. We remain committed, and I remain committed to work with Premier Ford on the task that he's given me, and that's to get homes built to tackle that housing supply crisis. We're going to keep moving forward with our goal of getting at least 1.5 million homes built by 2031, but I recognize that the work has to be done in a manner that builds trust with Ontarians, in addition to the fact that we need to build those homes for people who need them and deserve them. As Minister, that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm pleased to answer questions from you at this time. Yes.
You are a career politician. You've been at this for what, 40 years? You've always had a good reputation. People around here, even opposition critics, say you're a decent man and a good politician. How is it possible you failed at this key role, at this pivotal moment for your government on such a toxic, controversial file? How is it that you failed with all your years of experience?
I completely accept the responsibility that I was overly reliant on my chief and my staff. That I regret that I didn't provide the sufficient oversight. I'm very mindful of Commissioner Wake's recommendations, and I know as a government we want to instill that trust back into Ontarians. But I accept.
Why don't you resign today, Minister?
I'm here to accept responsibility, Richard, for the lack of oversight I had in the process. I want to make it very clear to Ontarians that I'm sorry that we didn't do a better job, and that I personally didn't do a better job in terms of the oversight. We're putting a plan in place to create that trust and to regain that trust, as I said, as a result of the Auditor General's recommendations. But I take responsibility, and I regret that the process that came under my watch didn't meet expectations. It didn't meet my expectations.
Minister, why do you have a different standard of accountability for yourself than you did for a lot of Liberal cabinet ministers? I'll read one quote from me here. There used to be a time when ministers took their integrity seriously. Here's another one back from the mid-2010s. There's never any shame, never any dishonor in doing the right thing. You called on all sorts of Liberal cabinet ministers to resign, and they had not been found wanting in 2 successive reports from legislative watchdogs. So what makes you so special?
I take the recommendations from both the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner very seriously, and I've been very open with Ontarians today in terms of accepting complete responsibility over the process that took place in the ministry. I'm committed, as well as our government is committed, to ensuring that we do better moving forward. But as I said in my statement yesterday, the buck stops with me, and I accept and regret that Ontarians have gone through this process.
You're saying that you regret it, you're apologizing for it, but you told the Integrity Commissioner that you were not in a very happy mood about how this was going on at the time. So why didn't you do anything? You could have stopped this.
Well, we had, as the Integrity Commissioner acknowledged, the reason for our decision in this regard was, because we're in a middle of a housing supply crisis, and he acknowledges the reasons why we did what we did. It doesn't negate the fact. It doesn't negate the fact that I'm accepting the responsibility as minister that the process that should have been created in our office should ensure public trust and confidence. And clearly, the recommendations from both reports indicate that they do not. So I accept fully the criticism that the Integrity Commissioner has leveled against me. And as a government, we're going to continue to do two things. We're going to obviously continue to move forward because we're still in a housing supply crisis, but we need to ensure that the public trust and confidence is restored. And I know that both the Premier, who you met with this morning, and I both feel the same way, that the government needs to move forward. And I think yesterday's action in regards to one of these properties shows that we're serious about ensuring that happens.
What do you think the consequence should be for you?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
What do you think the consequence should be for you? You've said that the buck stops with you. Nothing seems to have happened, though, other than you now apologizing. What should the consequence be?
Ontarians need to have a process that builds public trust and transparency, and the government of Ontario takes both recommendations from both of our independent officers seriously. We are going to implement a better process moving forward, and Ontarians need to know that that's a commitment. I'm here to accept responsibility.
You're going back to the drawing board, Minister. You keep saying that you want to build houses. We've got two reports now that's saying that the Greenbelt plan does not lead to houses being built. If you really want to accomplish that goal, why not go back to the beginning and do it right? Do it in a way that you will actually achieve houses in Ontario.
As I responded to you a couple of weeks ago, the process that the government has started to put forward using the nonpartisan provincial land and development facilitator is a process that will help build upon the recommendations that both the Integrity Commissioner and the Auditor General have put forward. We've already demonstrated with the property yesterday in Ajax that the process using this nonpartisan office is a good one. It identified something a couple of weeks ago that we were able to investigate, and we were able to make a very quick decision to post moving those properties back into the Greenbelt. So the government is committed to ensuring that this is a better process, and we'll continue to work towards that.
Confidence in you again, if they're not going to be able to what message does it send to Ontarians if their housing minister isn't going to face any kind of consequences?
Well, I do accept everything that's in those reports. I'm very clear to Ontarians how I feel in terms of what I should have done and what I could have done to create a more transparent process. As I've said, I regret that I didn't, that I should have had a better process. I regret that I relied on my former chief to direct a process that should have been directed more completely by myself. And I say to Ontarians that the process needs to change, and as a government, we're going to make that decision. But I accept responsibility.
Minister, the Integrity Commissioner's report seems to indicate that once you received the mandate letter directing you to look at contractions in the Greenbelt, that you felt a certain discomfort with the idea, because after 4 years of the Premier saying the Greenbelt was never going to be open, now here you were getting completely opposite direction. Why were you so uncomfortable with the Premier's direction?
I received a mandate that was pretty large for Ontarians, and I've acknowledged it for the last year, that building at least 1.5 million homes by 2031 is an order that is very, very difficult to achieve, given the fact that the best year that we've ever had in 30 years was 100,000 starts, and that won't get us in a 10-year period to 1.5 million. So we've done a tremendous amount to get on that goal. But it doesn't change the fact that this process, the process that dealt with these 15 properties, was not a good process. It needed to be better. The way that the Integrity Commissioner has outlined the changes, we as a government, we need to fix this process moving forward. We're committed to do so. But Ontarians need to know that I accept the responsibility, that I didn't have the oversight that we should have had that protected the people's interests.
Minister, if the process was broken, why should Ontarians see the result of the process as legitimate?
Well, I think yesterday the government demonstrated something that I think many of you were very skeptical in November when we posted it, to say that if we didn't have substantial completion on these properties that we would put them back in the Greenbelt. There were a lot of people in this room who were skeptical that the government would do that. And yesterday we demonstrated that we were prepared. We want to send a message to all of those property owners that the government is serious about ensuring that there's a nonpartisan process led by the provincial land and development facilitator to deal with those properties. We mean what we said in November, but that doesn't negate why I'm here today. I'm here today because the Integrity Commissioner outlined a process that I should have directed that was better in terms of outcomes for Ontarians.
Did you knowingly put your head in the sand?
Again, I've accepted responsibility that I overly relied on my chief to. I am.
Did you knowingly put yourself in the sand, head in the sand, to avoid the political repercussions?
I think the Integrity Commissioner's report covered that the process that was directed from the ministry should have been more directly related to myself, and it shouldn't have been relied on another individual, namely my former chief, in terms of how those properties were dealt with. So I think that
checks out with your reputation. You're not seen as an incompetent person, but when you read that report, that's what it looked like. The only way it makes sense to people who know you is that if you thought this was being done because the Premier wanted it, that his people were taking care of it, is that how you saw it at the time?
Yeah, it was, the process around the mandate and the decision around these properties was a big decision by the government. As I said to you all in November, it was a fundamental shift completely from our position in the previous term. The reason was very simple. We were in a severe housing supply crisis, the likes we had never seen in this province. It was getting worse and worse as reports started to stack up. That the problem wasn't just 1.5 million homes, it was at least 1.5 million homes. So the government decided, as I said to you, to make a decision to change course given the severity. The Integrity Commissioner's report that I welcome, it's very clear, the findings, that under my watch there should have been better oversight, there were flaws, there was an over-reliance on one individual. And as I've said to you countless times today, I accept completely the responsibility for that process. It's under my watch. I've said to you yesterday, I said to you today that the buck stops with me, and I've accepted clear responsibility.
For your resignation at the AMO conference, and and Indigenous leaders also want you. How do you have any credibility left with the people you're supposed to be dealing with?
Well, I had some really good meetings at AMO with our municipal partners, with Six Nations. I've been up north the last 3 days, had a couple of really good announcements with one of our indigenous partners, Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, and the decisions and the announcements that the Premier made and that I made at AMO are extremely important for the government to ensure that we get 1.5 million homes at least built in the next 10 years. So we're going to continue to work with our partners and get advice from them, whether it be our Indigenous partners or whether it be our municipal partners. We've got a Building Faster Fund that's 1.2 million that mirrors the federal Housing Accelerator Fund for Ontario, and we need to make sure this works for municipalities.
You keep saying that the decision was too big, that it was tremendous. Did the Premier set you up to fail with this task?
This is the last question.
The report's pretty clear on where the responsive.
Honesty, did the Premier set you up to fail? Was the task too big for you and your office?
The report is very clear that under my watch, I'm answering based on the recommendations of the report. I'm here to answer the recommendations of the report, which clearly says that the process under myself as minister didn't provide the transparency, that was required in this regard. And I remain committed. I accept responsibility. As I said at the start of this press conference, I apologize to Ontarians that I did not provide more oversight to my chief of staff, my former chief of staff, and for this process. But I want to, as the government, make sure that the next process has more openness and more transparency.
What exactly will you do
Thank
when
you so
not
much.
oversee